Picture a country so vast it takes 11 time zones to contain it. An empire that stretches from the Baltic Sea to the Pacific Ocean, from the Arctic tundra to the steppe. The largest country on earth by land mass, ruled by a god-emperor called a Tsar, whose palace in St. Petersburg glitters with 40 kilograms of pure gold on its ceilings alone. Now zoom in, past the golden spires, past the onion domes of Moscow, past the grand estates of the nobility, where French is spoken at dinner because Russian is considered too crude for civilized conversation, past the provincial towns, past the dirt roads, past the toll gates where peasants bow their heads and look at the ground. Keep going until the road turns to mud, and the mud turns to track, and the track leads to a cluster of grey log houses with half-collapsed rooftops, a frozen well, a church with a leaking roof, and mud everywhere. And in one of those houses 5 children are waiting for dinner. Dinner is boiled cabbage water, not cabbage soup, not even soup, really. Water, with cabbage leaves in it, boiled until the leaves dissolve into something that is technically a liquid. And also, technically, all 5 of these children are going to share it from one bowl with one spoon. This is Russia, 1853. The Tsar is Nicholas I, who is old and sick and doesn't know this village exists. And nobody at any Tsar's dinner table is thinking about these 5 children tonight. We're going back there. Not as historians looking at serf mortality statistics, not as economists analysing unfree labour. We're living it. One day, one village, one pot of cabbage water, everything these children would have seen, smelled, felt, and survived. And what they almost didn't survive, that's part of the story too. So, Henry's history for sleep. I genuinely have no idea if any of you actually fall asleep to stories about 19th century Russian serfdom, or if you're all just here because you like collecting niche historical misery before bed. Either way, get comfortable in a way that the people we're about to visit absolutely could not. Subscribe if you want. Here we go. Your eyes open to dark. Not the familiar dark of a bedroom with light leaking under the door, or the soft grey pre-dawn you know from anywhere with street lamps or phone screens or lit windows from neighbouring apartments. This is a different kind of dark, a heavy dark. The dark of a space where the only light is a single clay lamp burning tallow fat, set so low it barely pushes shadows back from the corners of the room. For half a second you've forgotten where you are. Then it hits you. The smell. And in this house, in this village, in the winter of 1853, the smell requires its own explanation. There's the stove, a clay and brick structure in the corner that is the largest thing in the room. That is, in some sense, the room, because everything inside this house is organised around the stove the way everything in a solar system is organised around its star. The stove burns damp wood and peat, and it produces smoke that should theoretically exit through the chimney, but frequently decides to stay at shoulder height instead. That smoke has soaked into every surface in this room. The walls are black with it. Your hair is black with it. The inside of your nose is black with it. You breathe it every minute of every day, and on mornings like this you can taste it on the back of your throat like something almost solid. There's the smell of animals, because this is a Russian peasant household in January, and the goat and the 2 sheep are not outside. They're in here, on your right, separated from the human sleeping area by a low wooden partition that does not partition the smell. The goat smells like wet fur and old milk and something sharper underneath that you have no name for. The sheep smell like wet wool and warm, damp earth. There's a smell of 7 human bodies who have not bathed since September. This is not laziness. The nearest bathhouse, a communal bathhouse in the neighbouring hamlet, is a 3-verst walk away, and costs a half kopeck per person to use, which is a half kopeck this family does not have. Your mother's hands are too cracked and swollen from cold to wring out wet cloth properly, and the temperature outside right now is approximately -20 degrees, so you don't bathe. You haven't bathed since September. Everybody in this house smells like everybody in this house, which means you've all stopped noticing it in the way you stop noticing the wind. And underneath all of it, so deep it's almost geological, the smell of old earth and slow decay. The floor of this house is packed dirt. The walls are logs that have stood here for 40 years, slowly being reclaimed by moisture. Somewhere in the wall to your left, something has been decomposing for weeks. Nobody knows exactly what. Nobody has the energy to find out. Welcome to Goryachevo village, Ryazan province, in the winter of the year of our Lord 1853. You're 12 years old. Your name is Kolya. Nikolai technically, but nobody has called you Nikolai since your grandfather died 3 years ago. You've always been Kolya. You will be Kolya until you die, which at current rates may not be as far away as it should be for a 12-year-old. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You're lying on the top of the stove. This is the best sleeping spot in the house. The stove holds heat the way stone holds the memory of summer. Long after the fire dies down for the night, the clay and brick radiate warmth into the space above them. The top of the stove is a flat, broad platform built for exactly this purpose. The old, the sick, and the very young sleep here. You're sleeping here because you were sick last month. A fever that your mother treated by wrapping you in goat hair and making you drink hot water with ash dissolved in it. The fever broke. Whether the goat hair helped, or whether your body simply decided to continue existing out of stubbornness, is a question that will never be resolved. Your grandmother is also up here. She is 80-something. Nobody knows exactly. The records before the last census are inconsistent, and she herself is unclear. And she smells like old age and the specific herb she keeps in a rag around her neck against evil spirits. She breathes so slowly at night that you sometimes count the seconds between breaths just to reassure yourself. 14, 15, then the quiet intake of air. Still alive. Below you on the floor and on low wooden benches, your mother and your brother Vanya, 9 years old, and your sisters Masha, who is 7, and Alyona, who is 4, and the baby Petya, 18 months old, who has not stopped crying since November. Petya is crying right now. That's what woke you. The sound is thin and reedy. Not a healthy baby cry, not the full-throated outrage of a well-fed infant demanding attention. This is something smaller, more tired. Petya has learned that crying doesn't reliably produce food. He cries anyway. It is the only vocabulary he has for the thing that's wrong. Your mother makes a sound in the dark. Low, tired, the sound of a woman who has already been awake twice tonight and has to be at the Lord's fields before daybreak. Kolya, you're already sitting up. Let me stop here and tell you about this house, because the house itself is an argument, a physical statement about what your life is considered to be worth. It is called an izba. One room, that is the total architecture. Everything that happens in your family's life happens in this room. Eating, sleeping, dying, giving birth. Your mother has given birth here 5 times. with a neighbour woman helping and the children sent outside to wait regardless of the weather. The last time with Petya it was raining. Vanya and Masha came back in soaked through and spent a week shivering afterward. The room is approximately 6 metres by 5 metres. 30 square metres of living space for 7 people, 2 sheep, a goat, and whatever else finds its way through the gaps in the walls in winter. The walls are horizontal logs notched at the corners, the gaps between them filled with moss and clay. The clay cracks in the cold every winter. Every spring your mother patches the cracks. Every winter they open again. This has been happening for 40 years and will continue until the house falls down. One window. A single window, about 30 centimetres square, with birch bark stretched over it instead of glass. Glass is for the Lord's house. For you, birch bark is the compromise between having light and having a hole directly in the wall. It lets in a grey, underwater kind of light on good days. On bad days, when the bark gets wet and goes opaque, the interior of the house is dark even at noon. The stove takes up roughly a third of the usable floor. This is correct. This is not inefficiency. The stove is why you are alive. In January, in central Russia, with temperatures regularly touching -20 or below, the stove is the entire argument against dying. Your father built this stove. Your father, who's been gone for 4 years now, conscripted into the Imperial Russian Army under the 25-year service requirement for serf men. He might be alive. He might be fighting in the Caucasus, in the endless war against the mountain tribes. He might be in a ditch somewhere near Grozny. You don't know. Letters do not flow easily between a Ryazan province village and an army battalion, especially when neither your father nor your mother can read. The stove is his best work. It holds heat with extraordinary efficiency. It is objectively a masterpiece of peasant engineering, and your father will never come back to see it properly appreciated. But that's a separate grief. Right now it's before dawn, Petya is crying, and you need to get up. Your feet hit the air below the stove's warmth, and the cold arrives like a physical collision. The air in the room is maybe 4 degrees above freezing. You know this not because you have a thermometer, an absurd thought, but because you can see your own breath, and because the water in the clay pot near the door has a thin skim of ice on it, and because the skin of your bare feet feels like it's being pressed against something sharp and patient. You're wearing everything you own to sleep in. A rough linen shirt that was once your father's, cut down and rehemmed by your mother. Trousers made from sacking material, stiff with old dirt. Foot wrappings, strips of wool wound in overlapping layers around and around each foot. You have never owned socks in the conventional sense. Your hands are the thing that mark you as a working child at 12. The right one has a callus across the base of all 4 fingers from gripping a scythe last summer. Your left thumb is missing the tip of the nail. You lost it to a splitting maul in October, the tool slipping, and the skin on both hands is cracked at every knuckle. The cracks red and deep enough to catch on rough fabric. In summer they heal, in winter they open again. You descend from the stove carefully. Your grandmother is a light sleeper, and descending clumsily means your foot lands on Masha's leg, which means Masha wakes, which means another small voice joining the sound that Petya is already producing. Your mother is sitting up in her corner with the baby at her chest, nursing him in the dark, which you know not because you can see it, but because Petya's crying has become intermittent protest instead of sustained demand. Your mother's name is Avdotya. She's 31 years old. She looks 50. This is not unkindness to say. This is what happens when a woman in a serf village has had 5 children. Lost one, an infant before you who lived 7 months, and has been working the Lord's fields since she was old enough to hold a hoe. She holds out one of your bath shoes without speaking. Bath shoes, lapti, the word in Russian, are made from woven strips of birch bark. They are the footwear of peasants because leather shoes cost money, and money is not something this family has. Bath shoes are warm enough when new and properly wrapped over the footcloths. They wear out in 2 weeks of hard use. Your current pair has been in use for 6 weeks and communicates this fact through several strategic openings. You find the second shoe. You put them on and tie the binding cords carefully around your ankle. A loose bast shoe in deep mud is a lost bast shoe, and a lost shoe doesn't get replaced until spring. The goat behind the partition watches you with flat yellow eyes. It has judged you. You don't care. The goat is warm and fed and legally belongs to Count Dmitry Obolensky the same as you do, and neither of you have any say in this arrangement. This is as good a moment as any to explain exactly what you are, legally speaking, in Russia in 1853. You are a serf. This means you are owned, not employed, not a tenant. Owned in the same legal category as the goat and the grain in the cellar and the land under the house. Count Dmitry Obolensky, whose estate this village is part of, owns Goryachevo. He owns the land, the forest, the frozen stream, the mill, the church, which he built, so the priest's salary comes from him, and the 300 souls who live here. The word souls, let's pause on that. The census that counts the population of serf estates is called the revision soul census. It counts the number of taxable male serfs, not people, souls. Women and children are recorded, but what the government wants to know is how many adult male souls the estate has, because that's the unit of economic production that the system is built around. At 16, you'll be added to the census roll as a soul. You're not there yet. Obolensky can sell members of your family to pay his debts. He's done it twice since your mother's memory began. He sold the blacksmith's family, all 5 of them, to settle a gambling debt 8 years ago. They walked away in a cart and everyone in the village watched, and nobody said anything because what is there to say? He sold a 17-year-old girl named Praskovna to resolve a land dispute with a neighbouring landowner 2 years ago. She sat in the cart and looked back at the village until she disappeared around the tree line, and your mother didn't speak for the rest of that day. Obolensky lives in a manor house 8 kilometres away. You have seen it twice from the outside, a large structure at the end of an alley of linden trees with glass windows, many glass windows, and smoke from multiple chimneys. There is, your grandmother has told you, a ballroom in which the Count's father once burned 100 candles simultaneously. You've never met him in any context that involved conversation. You've seen him ride through the village on inspection, sitting straight on a chestnut horse, wearing a coat trimmed with fur, looking at everything including you with the carefully calibrated interest a man might take in his inventory. That is what you are to him. Inventory. Right now, though. Right now he's not looking at you. Right now you're just cold, and Petya needs tending, and the water barrel needs breaking and hauling, and it's time to go outside. The door opens inward. This matters. In a place where snow can pile 3 feet against an outward opening door and trap you inside until someone digs you out from the other side, every door opens inward. You step outside. The cold is not a temperature. The cold is a substance. It enters your nostrils and immediately makes you aware of the fragile architecture of your lungs. It hits the damp linen of your shirt and turns it briefly into something like cold metal against your ribs. The cold has intent. The cold is working towards something. The sky above the village is the colour of old pewter. Not black. The snow below gives back a faint grey light, a diffuse glow that makes the village visible as dark shapes against white. The houses, the fence lines, the communal well in the centre of the village, its wooden frame creaking slightly in a wind from the northeast. Goryachevo is a serf village of approximately 300 souls. It sits in flat country, flat in every direction, flat the way that land formed under ancient inland seas is flat, which is to say not just flat, but absolutely, historically, philosophically flat, as if the earth itself has given up on vertical ambition. The forest begins about 400 metres out, birch and pine. The fields surround the village in long strips, now buried under 1/2 metre of snow. The stream is frozen, smoke from the chimneys already, other households waking. A dog barks somewhere in the village, once, then stops. Across the common, old Yevstigny is having his morning coughing fit. You can hear it with horrible clarity in the still, cold air. Yevstigny has had that cough since autumn. In the spring, you think, he probably won't have it any more. Not because it will get better. This is how you think at 12 in this village in this winter. You think about death the way you think about weather. It comes. Sometimes it passes. Sometimes it stays. 3 houses down, Fedosia is already at the well, breaking ice with a stone. 16 years old, with the particular efficient economy of movement of someone who has performed this exact sequence of tasks every day since she was old enough to be useful. She nods at you as you approach. You nod back. No words necessary in this cold. The rope on the well pulley is stiff with frost. You work it back and forth to free it. Bucket goes down. Bucket comes up. Cold water sloshes against the sides, some of it finding the cracked skin of your knuckles. You carry the bucket back to the barrel. You repeat this twice. Your mother needs water for cooking and for the animals. The 2 trips, bucket in hand, feet crunching on snow packed hard by. Months of foot traffic is not dramatic work. It is not interesting work. It is just the first task on a list of tasks that will not end until you fall asleep tonight. This is, fundamentally, what serfdom looks like from inside it. Not chains, not always violence, though the threat of violence is always present. Mostly it looks like this, an unending succession of necessary tasks performed by people who are too tired and too hungry to question the arrangement, because questioning the arrangement requires an energy that you don't have, because you're too tired and too hungry. You carry the water. Here is how your life is organized. On this estate, like most estates in Ryazan province in 1853, the serfs owe the lord 3 days of labour per week. This is called bashchina, corvée labour. You work the lord's land 3 days. On the other 3 days, Sundays belong to God. You work your own allotment, the strip of field allocated to your family from the communal land. The allotment strips are how your family eats, rye mostly, some turnips, a small strip of buckwheat. The yield is almost never quite enough the whole year, but almost never enough is different from not enough. and you've learned to navigate the space between them. 3 days for the Lord, 3 days for yourself, and then winter, when the fields are frozen and the Lord's demands shift. Firewood to be cut and hauled to the estate, repairs to estate buildings, women put to spinning and weaving in their homes, men sent on various tasks that the estate manager dreams up when he's sitting in his warm office feeling productive. The estate manager is a man named Filippov. You need to understand Filippov. He is not a noble. He's a serf himself, technically, owned by the same count, in the same legal condition, which is one of the more interesting paradoxes of the Russian serf system. The man with the most immediate power over your daily life is himself owned by the man who owns you. Filippov has his own izba in the estate, slightly better than yours. He receives a small cash salary. He has a horse. In this world, having a horse is an extraordinary marker of status. Filippov is in his 40s, heavy-set, with a beard going grey and eyes that are very pale, almost colourless, in a way that you find unnerving. He misses nothing. He has a specific talent for appearing at exactly the moment when someone has sat down for 30 seconds, or is using the outhouse for slightly longer than strictly necessary, or has let their attention drift to the sky instead of the work in front of them. He carries a short leather strap at his belt. He doesn't always use it, but he always has it. This morning, you're going to the estate grain storehouse. In winter, the fields are frozen, but the estate has grain from the autumn harvest. Rye, buckwheat, a little wheat, stored in a long wooden building near the manor's outer edge. The grain needs to be turned, aired, checked for moisture and rot, moved from one stack to another so air can circulate. If stored grain gets damp, it moulds. Moulded grain is worthless. The grain is the count's profit margin made solid, and the count's profit margin will not be endangered by inadequate air circulation. So you're moving sacks. You're going with 3 other boys from the village, Mitka, who is 14, and therefore senior in the hierarchies that matter here, Seryoga, who is 13, and your closest friend in the specific way, 2 boys who have grown up 50 meters from each other and shared every experience, can be said to be friends without ever discussing friendship. And little Fedka, who is 10 and should not be doing this work, but whose father has been sick since November. You walk in a cluster through the grey pre-dawn, shoulders hunched against the northeast wind, not talking. Talking requires opening your mouth wide, and opening your mouth wide in this wind is unpleasant. You communicate through proximity and glances. You've been communicating this way for years. The track from the village to the estate buildings is well worn, packed solid by decades of feet and occasional cartwheels. In summer it's almost pleasant. A line of birch trees on the left, their trunks luminous. In January the birch trees are bare and black. Their branches click against each other in the wind with a sound like someone tapping their fingers impatiently on a table. Fedka is wearing his older brother's bast shoes. The brother, 17, was conscripted last spring. They're too big. He keeps half tripping on the binding cords, catching himself, walking on. You notice. You say nothing. There's nothing to say. You don't have extra shoes. The storehouse appears from the morning grey after 20 minutes. A large log building, longer than wide, padlocked door, 2 adults already standing outside stamping their feet. You arrive, you join them, you stamp your feet, and then you wait. The cold is a patient thing. It works on you while you wait, finding the thinnest parts of your clothes, the collar of your shirt, the gap between your foot wrappings and your ankle, and pressing in. Your ears ache. Your nose has gone from being cold to having stopped reporting accurately on its own situation, which is a kind of cold, you know, better than you'd like. You tuck your chin into the neck of your shirt and breathe the smell of your own body and wait for the sound of a horse. He arrives 20 minutes after everyone else. He always arrives 20 minutes after everyone else. You have never understood why. He has the key. He told everyone to be here at dawn. He makes you wait. It's possible this is deliberate. A small daily exercise of power, a reminder that he has it and you don't. And then the horse arrives, steaming, and Filippov looks down at the six of you from the saddle and says nothing for a moment. Just those pale eyes moving across your faces. Then, get inside. The padlock opens, the door swings inward. The smell that comes out is dense and layered. Old grain dust, mouse droppings, the faint sweetness of slowly fermenting rye. And it comes with warmth. The warmth of a large enclosed space that has been keeping grain from the cold for months. For a moment you just stand in the doorway breathing it, because warmth right now has a quality very close to pleasure. Inside, the sacks are stacked in long rows from floor to ceiling. In the pale light from the single high window, they look like some kind of hoard, which is, in a real sense, what they are. This is the Count's wealth in its most literal form. Grain, bagged, waiting to become money in the spring markets. Each sack weighs roughly 50 kilograms. You weigh roughly 35. Move them to the east wall, Filippov says. Stack 4 high. When that stack is done, start from the north end. This is about air circulation. You understand this. Understanding the reason for the work does not make the work lighter. You and Seryoga take the first sack between you, one at each end, bent forward, moving in the short, shuffling steps that are all you can manage under this weight. The burlap fabric is rough against your hands, coarse enough to catch on the cracked skin of your knuckles even through the wrappings. The grain inside shifts with each step, making the sack unstable, requiring constant small adjustments to keep from being thrown sideways. 50 kilograms between two people is 25 kilograms each. This is correct math. It is also, for a 12-year-old who has not eaten since yesterday afternoon, a weight with specific consequences. Your back starts complaining at approximately the 5th sack. Not an acute pain, a slow building pressure in the lumbar region, a tightening that begins as a polite warning and becomes, over the course of a morning, a constant background note to everything else. You have had this back pain, or a version of it, since you were 9 years old and started doing serious field work. You will probably have it for the rest of your life. Everyone in this village has it. It is the baseline, the cost of admission to this particular existence. You lift, you carry, you lower, you go back. The sacks keep coming. By mid-morning, you know, because the light from the high window has shifted from pewter grey to something approaching pale gold, your body has upgraded its communications. The back remains a steady presence, but the stomach has gotten louder. Hunger for you is not the sharp novelty it is for someone who encounters it rarely. You know hunger in its seasonal variations. There is summer hunger, milder because things can be foraged. There is harvest hunger, the specific cruelty of September when you're doing the hardest physical labour of the year on grain you're not allowed to keep. And then there is late winter hunger, January, February, the absolute bottom of the food year, when the autumn stores are running thin and spring hasn't come. Late winter hunger is not dramatic. It is constant, a low sustained presence in your body. the way a note held too long stops being music and becomes a fact. Your stomach doesn't growl dramatically. It aches, a dull, hollow ache that sits somewhere below your ribs and behind your spine simultaneously. It makes everything slightly harder to do than it would otherwise be. It is not overwhelming. It is simply always there. Moving grain sacks in a cold building with this hollow ache behind your ribs is the specific experience we're trying to convey right now. I want you to feel its texture without actually feeling it, because you are about to fall asleep, and that is a much better outcome than any of the available outcomes for the people in this story. Mitka has bread. He produces it at the midday break, 15 minutes standing in the cold because there are no chairs, from his coat pocket wrapped in a cloth. A piece of black rye bread. Dense, sour, dark, real bread. Mitka's family is marginally better off than most. His grandfather was a skilled carpenter who, over decades of careful negotiation, managed to arrange a small supplement from the estate. That supplement has trickled down through family resources in small specific ways, and one of those ways is that Mitka's mother can sometimes bake proper bread. Mitka eats. He is hungry. The bread is his. He has every right. You find a point approximately 3 meters to Mitka's left and observe it carefully. Fedka, who is 10 and has not yet fully developed the skill of strategic not looking, watches Mitka eat with eyes that are doing their absolute best to be invisible and failing completely. Mitka finishes the bread. He sees Fedka's eyes. A pause. He reaches into his coat pocket and produces a crust. The last piece, barely a mouthful, and holds it out. Fedka takes it with both hands, quickly, as if it might be reconsidered. He eats it in 3 bites and says very quietly, "Thank you." Mitka shrugs, looks away. Something has happened here that is simultaneously very small and completely enormous, and nobody talks about it, because in this village in this winter, you don't narrate the small kindnesses. You do them, and then you get back to work before Filippov notices you've stopped. You drink water from the barrel near the door, cold water with a mineral aftertaste. Your stomach notes the arrival of cold liquid with professional disappointment, and then the break is over. In the early afternoon, Filippov comes back. He stands in the doorway with his arms folded and those pale eyes moving along the new stacks, counting. He looks at the floor, where dragged sacks have left trails in the dust. He looks at the window, where the light is already beginning to angle toward afternoon. Then his gaze moves across the workers. Fedka has slowed down. This is not character failure. This is physics. Fedka is 10 years old and has been moving 50-kilogram sacks for 7 hours on no food. A small body with those inputs will slow down. This is what bodies do. Filippov does not share this perspective. "Boy," Fedka stops. His face has already gone to the specific blankness that peasant children develop early. The face that shows nothing, offers nothing, provides no purchase for whatever is coming. Faster. Yes, sir. Faster means now. Yes, sir. Fedka moves faster, or tries. He's at a stage of exhaustion where trying to move faster produces a slight wobble instead, and you see this, and without making a decision about it, you quietly reposition yourself to take more of the weight on your end of the next sack. Seryoga sees you do this and shifts his position. Between you, silently and without instruction, you compensate for Fedka's depletion in a way that Filippov's pale eyes don't catch. This is what resistance looks like at this level. Not confrontation. The quiet, constant redistribution of burden by people who know each other's limits and work around them. Filipov turns his pale eyes back to the stacks. By dark, he says. Finished before dark. He leaves. The sound of the horse recedes. Prokofy, the eldest, waits until the hoofbeats are completely gone. Then, very quietly, he says something about Filipov that covers Filipov's parentage, his moral character, and several specific suggestions about what he might do with his leather strap. Seryoga snorts. You keep moving the sacks. The light is already low and orange when Filipov returns to count the stacks one final time and delivers the dismissal. You are released with the same ceremony with which the grain sacks were released from their old positions, which is to say, none whatsoever. The job is done. Go away. You walk back to the village into a fading sky. The temperature has dropped another 5 degrees since morning. The wind has picked up. Snow has started. Not heavy, just a fine dry powder that the wind drives horizontally into any exposed skin on your face. Your ears have moved past the aching stage into something blunter and less specific. Your feet are numb, not completely. Numb in the way where you can still feel pressure and direction, but the detailed sensation is gone, replaced by a thick, cottony absence. This is the middle stage of cold. The first stage is pain. This stage, the second, is where the pain stops. The third stage, the one you're careful not to reach, is what your grandmother calls the white sleep. You flex your toes inside the bath shoes as you walk, a continuous rhythmic clenching and releasing. Your grandmother taught you this. Flex, release, flex, release. Keep the blood moving all the way home. Mitka and Seryoga peel off toward their own houses. Fedka is slightly behind you, and you fall back to walk beside him. There isn't anything to say, so you don't say anything. You just walk beside him the rest of the way. The village appears out of the grey-white landscape, the chimney smoke rising in the still early evening air. Your pace accelerates without a decision being made. Your body just moves faster toward the warmth. The izba door opens inward, and you push through it. The warmth hits you first. 12 or 13 degrees inside right now, which after the outdoor cold lands on your skin like a hand pressed flat on your face. Something close to pleasure. Then the smell, the compound smell of smoke, bodies, animals, and something else tonight. Something cooking, something. Your nose processes it before your brain. Water, heat, cabbage. And that is the complete inventory of what is in the clay pot on the stove right now. Water, cabbage, water that your mother carried from the well this morning, cabbage from the small root cellar under the house, dried, partially frozen cabbage buried in straw last autumn, the last vegetable of any significance remaining. Your mother has made shchi, or rather, she has made the ghost of shchi, the idea of shchi, the intention of shchi, because shchi in its full and proper form is a soup with cabbage, carrots, onions, ideally some form of fat or meat, sour, complex, warming, the defining dish of Russian peasant cooking. It is one of the great things to eat on a cold evening. What's in the pot is water and cabbage. The cabbage has been boiling for an hour. In that time it has broken down into soft, grey-green shreds floating in pale liquid. The liquid has absorbed a faint version of the cabbage's flavour. There is no fat. There is no meat. There's a small pinch of salt, because salt is precious, but not so precious you'd make children eat unsalted water. That is dinner. Your mother stands at the stove stirring the pot with a wooden spoon and doesn't look up when you come in. She knows it's you from the specific sound of your bare shoes and the particular rhythm of how you open the door. Vanya is sitting up against the wall, pale-faced, eyes slightly glassy, but sitting up. Better than lying down. Manageable. Masha has Alyona on her lap by the stove. Alyona is asleep, her cheek on her sister's shoulder, her hair stuck to her face. Petya is in the hanging cradle, a rough wooden box suspended from the ceiling beam by a rope, awake, watching the ceiling with the concentrated attention of a baby who has found something fascinating in the shadows. For a moment you just stand in the doorway and look at all of them, your family, your whole world. Close the door, your mother says. You close the door. This is the part we've been building toward. I want you to stay with me for a few minutes, because this moment deserves to be understood completely. Your mother ladles the cabbage water into a single clay bowl, one bowl for everyone. This is not symbolic. This is not a metaphor or a lesson. You do not each have your own bowl. There is one bowl and one wooden spoon, and the protocol around them is so deeply established that no one needs to be told. Everyone knows. She sets the bowl in the centre of the low wooden table. She lays the spoon beside it, then the bread, a small loaf of black rye, dense and dark, approximately the size of a large fist. Baked 4 days ago. It's hard now. Your mother has cut it into pieces, small, careful, precise pieces, arranged on a cloth beside the bowl. You count the pieces without deciding to. 6 pieces, one for each of the 5 children, one for your mother. Your piece is slightly smaller than your mother's. Your mother's piece is noticeably smaller than the piece she's given to Vanya, who is sick and needs more. The mathematics of this bread tells you everything you need to know about your mother. Everything she calculates, all the time, every day. Who needs what? Who can do with less? Who won't sleep without slightly more? Who can be asked to give up a little for the others? She does this calculation continuously, without paper, without being asked, without anyone knowing she's doing it. She has given herself the smallest piece. You sit down. The protocol. 1 spoon of broth at a time, passing the spoon around the circle. No one takes a second spoon before everyone has had a first. The bread is not dipped. Bread is too precious to waste on absorption. You eat it separately, in small bites, between rounds of broth. Your mother first. She lifts a spoon, takes a small sip, not a full spoon, a careful sip, and passes it to Vanya. Vanya, Masha, Alyona, you. Back to your mother. 2 rounds. 3. The bowl is shallow, the broth is thin, and after 3 rounds each there is almost nothing left. A few soft strands of cabbage settled at the bottom in a shallow pool. Your mother tips the bowl and divides the remaining cabbage between Vanya's bread and Alyona's bread. The meal is over. It has lasted approximately 8 minutes. By any nutritional standard, you are still hungry. The dull, hollow ache has been addressed only marginally. The broth is warm. It has warmed your stomach. It has provided whatever minerals were in the water and the cabbage. It has provided almost no caloric energy. You will go to sleep hungry tonight. You have gone to sleep hungry most nights this winter, but you have gone to sleep. The piece of bread in your hand is the realest thing in the world right now. You eat it slowly, slower than you want to. This is a skill. The trick is to let each bite last as long as possible, to resist the impulse to simply consume the whole piece in 4 bites and have done with it. You take small pieces and chew them thoroughly and let the flavour, complex, slightly sour, the rye doing what rye does, actually register on your tongue. It tastes like food. It tastes like eating. It tastes like the line between today and the day there is nothing. You eat slowly. You finish. You lick your fingers. You don't know what Count Obolensky's eating tonight. But I know, let me tell you. The Count's cook, a Frenchman named Henri Beaumont, brought to Russia in 1847 with strong opinions about proper technique, has prepared this evening a first course of consommé with pastry croutons, followed by roasted duck with a mushroom sauce made from dried porcini gathered from the forest your village borders, accompanied by boiled potatoes from the same earth your family worked last September, with butter and cream, followed by a dessert of preserved fruit in sugar syrup. The butter on Obolensky's potatoes contains more caloric value than your entire meal tonight. The mushrooms in his sauce were dried by women from your village. The rye that made your bread. The small loaf that gave each of you one careful portion. And the rye sitting in the Count's estate storehouse are the same grain, from the same field, grown under the same sky. The portion of it that was yours came from what you were permitted to keep from your allotment strip. The portion that will become money for the French cook's salary is what you spent today moving from one stack to another, sack by sack, with your cracked hands. You don't think about this in these terms. You don't have the vocabulary for this analysis. Even if you did, it would require an energy that you don't currently have, because you're 12 years old and tired, and your feet are starting to warm back up, which means they're going through the painful stage where sensation returns, and that is right now more present than any abstract calculation. But something in you knows, not in words, in the way your body knows things. Every cold morning, every aching back, every spoon passed around a circle of hungry children. Your body is keeping a ledger. It knows that the math doesn't add up in your favour. It knows that the abundance on one side of this calculation comes from the scarcity on the other. Your body keeps the count even when your mind doesn't have the language for it. The fire has been banked for the night. The stove is doing its slow, dignified work. Alyona is asleep across Masha's legs. Vanya has been put back in his corner with the extra cloth around him. Petya is in his cradle, for once quiet. Your mother is rocking it with her foot while she spins wool on a small handheld spindle. The spindle twisting and dropping in the firelight, dropping and twisting. Your grandmother has descended from the stove. This is an event. She doesn't always come down in the evenings. Her legs are bad. The joints swollen and stiff. The kind of swelling that's been building since before you were born. And sometimes she stays on the warm platform all evening, listening to the room without participating. But tonight she's down, seated on the low bench near the stove, wrapped in everything she owns, and she is talking. Your grandmother's name is Praskovna Ilyinichna. She is at least 80, possibly older. The records from before the last census are unreliable, and she herself is unclear, because precise birth years were not the orderly affairs for serfs that they were for the nobility. She was born before Napoleon came to Russia. She was alive when Goryachivo had a different owner. She knows things that are not written in any book. She's telling a story tonight, the one she calls How the Forest Saved Us. A winter story, because winter is when stories belong. About a winter 50 years ago when the grain ran out in February and the village nearly starved, and what happened was... Her voice is low. It has the texture of a very old voice, slightly hoarse, with pauses that are not hesitation but something else. The pauses in music, the held note that gives the next note its meaning. You've heard this story many times. You know exactly how it ends. This doesn't matter. Stories in this village are not told for novelty. They're told for the same reason prayers are said, because the telling is the point, because the repeating is a form of keeping, because if you stop telling the story, the knowledge inside it dissolves and you are left without the map that shows how your people survived. Masha is half awake, listening. She murmurs a question at the expected moment in the story, the moment where the women go into the forest, and your grandmother answers, and the exchange is so familiar you could script it, but it's alive in a way that scripts aren't. You're sitting on the bench near the door, feet stretched toward the warmth, listening in the way you listen when exhaustion meets a familiar voice, present and not entirely present. The words become something more like texture, like water over stones, like the crackle of the fire underneath. Outside, the wind has picked up. You can hear it through the walls, a low sustained sound with occasional higher notes when it finds a gap. The birch trees at the edge of the village, their bare branches moving, clicking together in the dark. Inside, warmth, story, the soft rhythm of the spindle dropping and turning. This is also what serfdom looks like, not just the hard things, this too. The warmth inside the hardship, the stories told in the dark, the way people make a life within the constraints of their life. Because what is the alternative? The alternative is to stop making a life, and that is its own kind of dying. Your grandmother's voice continues. The fire settles. Later, after the story, after your grandmother has made her careful way back up to the stove's warmth, you're almost asleep when you hear it. Vanya, breathing wrong. You're fully awake in an instant. Not startled. Calm. The specific alertness of someone who has learned to wake at important sounds. You can hear the difference between a child sleeping and a child in trouble, and what you're hearing right now is the latter. Fast, shallow breaths, and a sound in them. A faint sound, a slight wetness in the exhale. You get up. Your mother is already moving. She was never fully asleep, and she's at Vanya's side before you. Her hand on his forehead, then his throat, then his chest, palm flat, feeling the breathing from outside. Her face in the firelight is a communication, unambiguous, not good, not catastrophic, not yet, but not good. She pulls the cloth tighter around him, makes a sound, a low ha that you've heard before, the sound of a problem being assessed against inadequate resources, the sound of working with what you have, what she has, some dried herbs kept in your grandmother's bag, chamomile, a fever herb, dried, pressed flat, found at the forest edge in July, stored carefully in shade. A small piece of animal fat for the chest. Prayer. Her hands. She sends you for the fat. It's wrapped in cloth in a clay pot near the stove. You bring it. She unwraps Vanya's shirt and begins to rub his chest with slow circular strokes, the fat warming between her palms and transferring to his skin. He stirs but doesn't fully wake. This is medicine in Goryachevo in 1853. There is no doctor. The nearest physician who might see a serf is in Ryazan city, 40 kilometers away, and he doesn't make village calls. There is no pharmacy, no hospital, no infrastructure for this child's health beyond what exists in this room right now. Herbs, fat, warmth, the specific pressure of your mother's hands moving in slow circles. You watch her do this for a while. Then you go back to your spot on the floor. Vanya has your warm place on the stove now. Of course he does. You haven't said anything about this and won't. And you lie down. Sleep is slower in coming. You lie on your back and listen to the house. your grandmother's slow breathing above, Petya's occasional small sounds, the wind, the fire, and underneath all of it, Venya's breathing, still with a faint wet quality, still too fast. You count his breaths in the dark, a pointless activity. There is nothing the counting will accomplish, but it keeps you present with him. It keeps someone paying attention to the specific fact of his breathing in this specific dark. Maybe that is not nothing. In a place where you own nothing, where your labour belongs to someone else, where your body and time and future are mortgaged to a man who ate roast duck tonight and will not think of this village in the morning, attention is one thing that cannot be taken from you. It is yours to give. You give it. Vanya breathes. You count. The village is as quiet as it gets. Not completely quiet. A dog somewhere. The wind. A beam in the structure of the house, adjusting itself with a slow groan. Wood contracting in cold, speaking its patient language of expansion and release. The animals on their side of the partition, the goat shifting, straw moving. You can't see the sky from where you're lying, but you know what it looks like. You've seen it on nights like this. The snow stopped, the air clear, the stars extraordinary. The Milky Way visible as an actual band of pale light, the way it never appears anywhere with fires or lanterns. Stars so dense and clear they look like something spilled. Your grandmother told you once that some lights in the sky are the souls of the dead, carrying their brightness from wherever souls go. You have also been told by the travelling priest who came through the village 2 years ago that the stars are very far away and very old, and their light takes a long time to arrive. You like both explanations. They're both about the same thing. That you're seeing something from a very long time ago. That the past can arrive in the present as light. Your father is somewhere under these stars, in the Caucasus, or in a grave, or somewhere on the long road between. Alive or dead, he occupies some specific location in the world tonight. You think about this sometimes, about where his specific arrangement of experience and memory currently is. Whether he is warm, you tuck your feet closer to your body. Sleep. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday, the village men gather. The gathering, the mir, has been part of Russian peasant life for as long as anyone in Goryachevo can remember. It is a real governing body, with real authority over communal affairs. How the allotment strips are distributed, how shared resources are managed, disputes between families, the organization of collective obligations. It meets in Semyon's house in winter, which is larger than most because Semyon has 7 sons and therefore many hands, and therefore marginally more to show for it. You're too young to speak. 14 is the age of voice in the mir, but your mother sends you to listen and report back because she can't attend herself. Women don't speak in the mir. Their sons, if old enough, are their proxies. The gathering is about Stepan Kondratiev. Stepan was 22 years old, from the 3rd house on the east side of the village. In January, in a heavy snowstorm, he ran. He'd been planning it for months, cached food in the forest, chosen a route north, waited for conditions that would cover his tracks. He got 40 kilometers before he was caught. This is not unusual. The catch rate for runaway serfs in Russia in 1853 is very high. Serfs carry internal passports, documents identifying which estate they belong to, and moving through a country with checkpoints, with neighbours who might report an unpapered stranger for a small reward, is very difficult without papers. 40 kilometres is actually a reasonable distance for a winter run. He was returned. The punishment for unauthorised flight is, as typically, a flogging, then conscription, which means 25 years in the army, which means for all practical purposes Stepan is gone. His wife Marfa is in the village. His 2-year-old daughter is in the village. The mere debate is about whether to petition the count for leniency. Old Prokhor, who is 60 and has seen 4 runaways in his lifetime, says the petition is pointless and will only irritate the count. Young Timofey, 28, volatile and honest, says it's the only thing they can do and they should do it. The others fall between these positions in ways that are both true and contradictory. The genuine ambivalence of people who know that all available options are bad and have to choose among them anyway. You watch the debate. You are 12. You have no voice here yet. But you are absorbing everything. The specific weight that falls on words like useless and only. The way Prokhor's voice sounds when he says nothing will help, and the way Timofey's voice sounds when he says they have to try, and the way both of them are right about different things simultaneously. The petition is agreed on. They'll send it. You walk home and tell your mother everything. She listens without comment. Then she says, "What did you think?" You turn this over. Nobody usually asks you what you think. "I think Timofey is right," you say carefully, "and I think Prokhor is right, and I think the petition probably won't work, but they have to send it, because..." You don't finish the sentence. Your mother waits. "Because otherwise, what are we?" you say finally. She nods once. "Yes," she says. "That's right." It comes back 3 weeks later. The flogging has already happened. Stepan will be conscripted in the spring. Marfa Kondratiev comes to your mother and sits in the kitchen and cries. They sit together at the table for a long time. Your mother doesn't offer reassurance that things will be better, doesn't suggest this is less bad than it is. She makes tea, real tea, from the packet she's been saving since October, and she pours it and she sits. After a while, Marfa stops crying. She drinks the tea. She says thank you. She goes home to her daughter. This too is what resistance looks like at this level. Not the overthrow of the system, sitting with someone in their grief, refusing to leave them alone in it, making tea from precious stores because the moment demands something real. Life continues, the way it has no choice. This is the worst part of the year, and I want you to know it precisely. The root cellar, the last of the turnips finished, some dried mushrooms remaining, a small store of dried peas, the salted cucumbers, 3 jars, 1 already opened, the bread grain, the rye for grinding and baking, counted carefully, very carefully, because there needs to be enough to reach April, when the road's clear and there might be a chance to buy or borrow. The count says the math is possible, maybe, if everyone eats less than enough. Everyone is eating less than enough. You know this in your own body. Your belt, a piece of rope tied around your waist, has moved to a new notch. Your collarbone, when you wash your neck in cold water, is more prominent than it was in September. Your ribs are easier to count than they were at harvest. You're also growing, which is both fortunate and terrible. Fortunate because growth is health. Terrible because a growing body needs more food than a stationary one, and you don't have more food, you have less. And the growth is happening anyway, because your body has decided to continue its developmental program regardless of what the pantry looks like. And the gap between what you need and what's available produces a particular exhaustion that has no solution except time. You've noticed yourself thinking about food more than usual, not obsessively, not the consuming preoccupation of real starvation, just frequently. The way thoughts drift to food during dull work, the way you notice what other people are eating in a way you don't in better seasons. Fedka's family received a portion of millet from the village communal reserve last week, and you noticed it. You felt something close to envy before you caught it and redirected it, because Fedka is 10 years old, and his father has been sick since November, and his mother is managing everything alone, and Fedka deserves millet. But you noticed it. Your body noticed it. Hunger is, among other things, a form of attention. One February morning Filipov has not assigned you to estate work. A gap in the schedule, a small gift. You go to the forest for firewood. The forest begins about 400 metres from the village edge, past the common grazing ground, past the frozen stream. Birch and pine. The birch trunks white and bare, the pines dark green, carrying snow on their branches in small precise loads. The cold in the forest is different from the cold in the open, denser, more still. The trees break the wind's movement and the air is quieter, and the snow beneath the canopy is undisturbed powder, deep and light, untouched by wind. You sink to your knee with each step and have to lift your foot high for the next one. A slow, effortful progress that requires planning, where to step, how to shift weight, when to pause and catch your breath. But the forest has one thing the village does not have. You are alone. For the first time in, you try to count, possibly weeks, you're completely alone. No mother, no children, no grandmother, no Filipov with those pale eyes, no communal space with its constant shared sounds. Just you and the forest and the cold and the sound of nothing except, occasionally, snow falling from a branch in a soft sudden collapse. You stop between two birch trees. The world is white below, dark branches above, grey-blue sky in gaps between pines. Your own breath, visible in small clouds, the sound of your heartbeat when everything else goes quiet. You stand there, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 5. Nothing needs anything from you. You stay in it. Then you start looking for wood. You know what to look for. Fallen branches, large enough to be worth hauling, dry enough to burn cleanly. The forest floor is not generous here. The village has gathered wood from this forest for generations, and the obvious pieces are long gone, but you know where to look. Your mother taught you. Her mother taught her. You find a fallen birch behind some pines, mostly buried. You dig it out with your hands, the snow packing and crusting against your palms, cold finding every crack. The birch is solid, rotted only at the base, the rest good fuel. You break small branches with your hands. Use the hatchet at your belt for the larger ones. Old hatchet, cracked handle, still holds. Each strike sends a shock through your arm that you feel all the way to the shoulder. The sound is sharp and clean in the still air. You work for 2 hours. The bundle you assemble is barely liftable. You put it on your back with the rope looped across your chest and start toward the village. This walk is hard. The wood is heavy. Your feet punch through the snow's crust with each step, and you have to pull them back out with enough energy left to take the next step. You develop a rhythm, not the comfortable rhythm of easy work, but the grim, particular rhythm of a body that is committed to doing a thing and is doing it regardless of what the muscles say. The muscles say, "This is a lot." You say, "I know. You keep walking." The village appears through the trees, the church first, then the chimneys. You cross the common with the bundle on your back, bent under its weight, and you don't think about much except the door of the house and the wood stack, and the fact that after this load there will be another and another, because that is how the math of staying warm works. You arrive, you drop the bundle, you stand for a moment, hands on your knees, breathing. Your grandmother is watching from the birch bark window. When you look up, she gives a small, precise nod. That's all. That's the whole recognition. It is enough. 3 days later, there is an afternoon with no assigned task. This is suspicious. A gap in the obligation. You spend an hour helping your mother, then Masha takes over. Because Masha is 7 and entirely capable, and your mother gives you a brief look that means, go, you go. There's a communal hay barn at the edge of the village, a large wooden building with a ladder on the outside wall leading up to a hayloft. You've been to the top of this ladder before. You know what's there. The ladder is icy and you climb carefully, one hand's grip before the next, feet testing each rung. Cold, rough wood under your palms, 9 meters to the top. In this flat landscape, 9 meters is a significant elevation. You come over the top of the ladder and sit on the edge of the loft opening. And here it is, the view, not St. Petersburg, not any gilded dome or famous skyline, just Russia, flat in every direction. Flat the way that only land shaped by an ancient inland sea can be flat. Absolutely, historically, philosophically flat. As if the earth itself has given up on vertical ambition and accepted its place beneath a very large sky. The snow covers everything. Fields, frozen stream, common ground, forest edge. White on white on white, and then the sky above it, pale grey-blue. Enormous. The village from up here, the cluster of grey log houses, the church with its small dome, not gold, not any more, the gilding weathered to something like dull brass, the well, the lanes between houses compressed by snow into narrow channels, smoke from every chimney, every household burning fuel to survive. You can see the manor house from here, the Obolensky estate at the end of an alley of bare linden trees 8 kilometres away. From this distance, in the winter grey, it's just a shape, a larger structure than anything else in view, with more windows and steeper roof lines and what might be the smoke of multiple fireplaces visible above it. 8 kilometres, the distance between your life and that one. 8 kilometres, and an entire system built and maintained over centuries to ensure that this distance is kept. You look at the flat white landscape and you feel. You don't have the vocabulary for exactly what you feel. You feel the size of it. Russia, this empire that contains you, that stretches in every direction farther than you could walk in a lifetime, all of it under the same Tsar, all of it under the same sky. And somewhere in this enormous country there are people who have never been hungry, and people who have felt nothing else their entire lives. The wind is strong up here. It moves through your hair and finds the gaps in your coat and reminds you of exactly what you are and where you are. 12 years old, on a hay barn, in February in Ryazan. But for this moment, you can see. You can see that the world is large, that your village, your whole world, is very small within it. That beyond the forest edge the land continues and there are other villages with other people and other thin broths and other lists of things that need doing. You sit for 15 minutes. Nothing needs you for 15 minutes. Then you climb down carefully, the icy rungs cold through your hand wrappings, and you walk back to the house. Something is moving through the villages this winter. Not a physical thing. A word. A rumour. The kind that travels from traveller to villager, from church conversation to field conversation, always slightly different in the telling, always more or less hopeful depending on who's doing the telling. The rumour is the Tsar is going to free the serfs. This is not, in 1853, a new rumour. It has been circulating for decades. Alexander I talked about it. Nicholas I created committees to study it. The idea goes around and around like water in a well bucket, always moving, never arriving. But this time people are saying, this time something is different. The Tsar Nicholas is old and sick. His son Alexander will be different, more reform-minded. Something is shifting. You hear this in fragments, from the Mir meeting, from a travelling peddler who comes through in February, a state peasant, not a serf, free to travel with proper papers, and who brings not just thread and needles, but also news from the larger world. You're within earshot when the peddler talks to your grandmother. She listens with an expression you can't read. When he's gone, you ask her, do you believe it? She's quiet for a moment. The spindle drops and turns. My grandmother, she says finally, believed it too. A pause. And her grandmother before her. She doesn't say more. She doesn't need to, but she doesn't say no. She doesn't say it's impossible. She says, the belief has a history. The belief is something that has survived in this village longer than most of the people who carry it. Maybe that's something. Maybe that's the point. That you keep the belief alive not because you're certain, but because the alternative is to stop believing. And stopping believing is, in a place like this, a different kind of dying. You file this away. You are 12 in 1853. In 8 years, Alexander II will issue the Emancipation Proclamation. The serfs will be freed. You will be 20 years old when it happens. You don't know this, but you carry the belief the way you carry the coal in the clay pot at night, carefully in wrappings, needing only a little attention to keep it alive. March comes. In the flat agricultural landscape of central Russia, March is not a pleasant month. It is a necessary month, a month that contains the mechanism by which February becomes survivable in retrospect. But it is not comfortable. The snow melts and the ground becomes mud. Russian mud. The kind of mud that has achieved philosophical status in this culture. Black, deep, viscous mud that captures your foot on the way down and disputes your claim to it on the way up. The roads become impassable for wheeled transport. The paths between houses are trenches. Your best shoes last approximately 2 weeks in March mud before they surrender. But under the mud, the earth is waking. This is what makes March endurable. Beneath the mud, beneath the still cold soil, the root systems of things that will become food are beginning to move. The first nettles appear in sheltered spots at the forest edge. Young, tender, extraordinarily nutritious, available to anyone who knows where to look and doesn't mind the sting. Your mother knows where to look. On a March afternoon, she takes you and Masha to the forest edge with a cloth bag, and she shows Masha how to pick nettles using folded cloth as a glove. You've done this before. Masha watches your mother's hands, the quick, confident movement, the fold of cloth between fingers and stem. Masha picks her first nettle and is stung on the wrist through the cloth and flinches and says "ow" in a very small voice. Then she picks the next one more carefully. The nettles fill the bag. Dinner tonight is nettle soup. Nettle soup is not cabbage water. Nettle soup has real nutrition in it. Iron, vitamin C, minerals your body has been missing since October. It is green, the first green thing you've eaten in months. Your mother makes it with some dried peas and the last small piece of lard and the nettles, and what comes out of the pot is this astonishing dark green, thick enough to coat the back of the spoon, smelling of spring and mineral and earth. The bowl goes around the table. The mood at the table is different. Not festive. You're not easily festive, not when the spring is still uncertain and the summer work hasn't started. But something in the air is lighter. Alyona, who has barely engaged with dinner for weeks, wants more, which means someone else has less, but nobody minds, because Alyona wanting more is itself news, it is itself spring. Your mother watches Alyona eat with an expression you've learned to identify, relief. The specific texture of relief, the thing you feel when a feared outcome hasn't happened. Not yet, always that qualifier, but not yet is enough. Not yet is today. Not yet is, we made it to March. A week later, the ground has thawed enough to work. Your family's allotment strip, a quarter of a deciatina, approximately a quarter of a hectare, a long narrow piece of field allocated by the mir, sits on the southern side of the common field, which means it gets more sun and thaws a little sooner. In the great lottery of village life, this is a small piece of luck. You're out in the field with your mother and Masha. You have one plough, wooden-bodied, iron-tipped, the design unchanged for 1,000 years, and no horse, no ox, nothing to pull it. So you put your body against the crossbar at the front of the plough and push, while your mother takes the handles and steers. The soil is cold and resistant. Ploughing cold soil is like pushing through slowly yielding stone. Your feet slip in the mud. The plough catches on last year's roots, and you have to back up and try again. Your mother corrects the furrow line, keeps it straight by force of will and experience. You push. Every muscle in your upper body is in this. Arms, back, thighs. Braced against the resistance, feet constantly finding purchase and losing it. Your breath comes hard and fast and white in the morning air, which is finally, tentatively, smelling like something other than cold. The turned earth comes up behind the plough blade in dark furrows. That smell hits you. Deep and mineral, the smell of underground, of things that have been sealed away all winter. The smell of what the soil is, not dirt, but something alive and waiting. The smell of the meal that might exist if the summer is good and the blight doesn't come and the Lord takes his portion and leaves enough. Masha walks behind with a stick, breaking large clods into smaller ones. She's learned to put her weight into it. 7 years old and working with the efficient precision of someone taught by necessity to do things properly. By midday you've done a third of the strip. Your mother's hands gripping the plough handles are red and swollen. Her joints hurt. They've hurt since a winter 5 years ago when she couldn't keep them warm enough and the inflammation settled in. She doesn't say this. She never says this. But you know. You sit on the field edge and eat the bread your mother brought. Drink water, rest your backs, a lark, somewhere in a field to your left. Its song lifting and lifting, the particular song of a lark which climbs and climbs as if it has business in the sky. You know what this means. Everyone in this village knows what this means. The worst is behind you. Your mother closes her eyes. Just for a moment. Just for the song. You don't look at her. Some moments need privacy, even when you're sitting 2 feet apart. The lark sings. The earth waits. The months after that are work. Not thin work. Dense, demanding physical work. The work of people who eat more in summer, and therefore can do more, and therefore do more, in a cycle that has its own logic. The summer is when the body gets what it's been promised. Berries from the forest, fish from the unfrozen stream, nettles and wild garlic in June, cucumbers and turnips from the allotment by July. The green things, the living things. You eat strawberries with Masha one evening in June, picking them at the forest edge, and eat most of them before you get home. and feel no guilt whatsoever about this. Each one is a small concentrated explosion of sweetness, the particular sweetness of wild strawberries, which is not the sweetness of anything cultivated but something wilder and more exact. Your whole summer is worth that flavour. In July there is the Lord's hay, in August the Lord's grain, in September, always September, the reckoning. Your own harvest. The rye on your allotment strip has come up well, better than last year. The stalks are tall, the head's heavy, and the morning you cut it, just you and your mother and Masha, Vanya doing what he can, Alyona sent to scare birds from the edges. The smell of cut rye fills the air completely, green and golden and sharp and dusty and real. You cut, your mother bundles, Masha carries, 3 days to cut, 2 days to thresh, beating the bundled stalks against a wooden frame, the kernels falling into cloth below, chaff filling your nose and mouth, your eyes streaming, your arms ache, your hands blister, crack, harden. Then the Count's portion comes off the top. The amount is set by custom. The custom is enough to make what remains not quite sufficient, but survivable. The arrangement has been calibrated over centuries to keep the balance exactly where the landowner wants it. Dependent enough to stay, healthy enough to work. What remains after the Count's portion? Possible. Probably enough. If the winter is not too severe, if Vanya stays well, if nothing breaks, you pack the grain into sacks. You carry the sacks to the root cellar. You count them. Your mother counts them. You exchange a look over the sacks. Enough. Probably. Maybe. You close the cellar. October. The urgency releases. The birch trees turn yellow, then orange, then let everything go over 2 weeks, until the ground around them is covered in wet gold that turns brown under the October rains. The days shorten. The temperature begins its patient descent. Alyona is 4.5 now, walking reliably, capable of carrying small things, able to fetch water from the barrel without being told. Every task she takes on is a task that becomes slightly less crushing for someone else. Petya is 2, walking, talking, single words, sometimes 2 together. He made it through his second winter. Every winter he survives is one that didn't take him. Your mother's hair is mostly grey. She's 32. You look at her sometimes and see 2 things at once. The woman she's becoming and the woman she was. You understand in some not yet articulate way that these are not separate things. The grey hair, the cracked hands, the lines around her eyes. These are not what happened to her. They are her. They are the record of every winter she has managed, and every child she has calculated for, and every prayer said over insufficient food, and every spoon passed around with the last swallow saved for the one who needed it most. You're proud of your mother in a way you would never say, and she would never ask you to say. November. The stove is lit for the night. Vanya is well. Completely, astonishingly well. He recovered the way children sometimes do, fully and without apparent lasting damage, and is now 10 years old and has opinions about everything and says all of them, which is both exhausting and proof of life. Masha is 8 and becoming someone. You can see the shape of the person she'll be in the way she moves through the house, competent, watchful, with a quality of stillness that is not passivity but its opposite, a deep attention to everything around her, a readiness. Alyona has named the goat Boria. The goat's opinion of this is unavailable. Petya is in the corner, asleep. The family intact. You're sitting by the birch bark window. The November light is almost gone. It's barely 4 o'clock. The sky outside is the colour of old pewter. Not yet the absolute cold of January, but the approach of cold. The last conversation of the year between warmth and its absence. You're thinking about Stepan Kondratiev, who ran, was caught, is now, somewhere, in an army uniform doing what conscripted serfs do. 25 years of service he did not choose. You're thinking about the petition that didn't work. And you're thinking about the word that keeps appearing in your grandmother's stories, in the peddler's news, in the conversations that happen in the spaces Filippov can't reach. Volya, freedom, a concept with a history in this country as long as the suffering that makes it necessary. Serfs have believed in it before, have been disappointed before, have believed again. The persistence of the belief is not nothing. The November light fails, grey to blue to black. Your mother lights the tallow lamp. The small orange flame finds itself in the room. Inside, warmth. Vanya arguing with Masha about something involving the wooden cup. Borya shifting behind the partition. Petya's breathing. The spindle dropping and turning. Home. The whole of your world, which is both less than you might wish for and more than you would know how to say. In the third week of January, Filippov appears at the door. This is unusual. Filippov sends messages through other people, through Prokofy, through the village elder, and his appearing directly at the door of a household means something specific. It means the task he has in mind is not communal. It's particular to you. Your mother answers the door. You can see her posture change when she sees him. The boy, Filippov says, tomorrow, main house. He doesn't explain further. He doesn't need to. Your mother nods and Filippov turns away and that's the end of it. Main house means the manor, the count's estate. You've never been inside it. Your mother doesn't say anything for a while after Filippov leaves. She goes back to the stove and stirs the pot with more attention than the pot currently requires. Then, keep your eyes down. Do what they say. Don't touch anything. Come home the same way you left. You understand this as a complete set of instructions. The walk to the manor takes 40 minutes. 8 kilometres of track that has been cleared of snow, not because anyone cares about your convenience, but because supplies need to arrive by cart from the district town, and carts require passable roads. The track passes through the common fields, through a stretch of bare winter forest, and then opens onto the linden alley your grandmother has described but you've never walked. The lindens are massive, planted, someone told you, by the Count's grandfather 60 years ago. Their bare branches arch over the road and interlock above your head, turning the last 200 metres into something like a tunnel. At the end of the tunnel, the manor. From outside the gate, you've seen it twice. From the hay barn in miniature from 8 kilometres away, but from inside the gate which the groundskeeper opens with a look that seems to say you should know better. It is something different. It is large. Not large in the way of a cathedral, not large with spiritual ambition. Large the way a statement is large, the way a sentence printed very big says the same thing as a sentence printed small, but says it differently. The building is 2 stories of pale yellow plaster over brick, with a colonnaded porch facing the alley and wings extending on both sides. The windows, which you've thought about before in the abstract, are close up a specific fact. Each one is larger than the entirety of your family's window. Each one is filled with glass, real glass, warped and wavy, and catching the grey winter light in ways that birch bark never does. You count the windows on the front face before you realise you're doing it. 18. 18 windows on one face of one house. The groundskeeper points you toward a side door. You go. Inside, the smell hits you before anything else. This is always the first thing. And the smell of the manor house is everything the smell of your izba is not. It is dry. Genuinely dry. The dryness of a building with proper chimney flues that remove smoke rather than sharing it with the inhabitants. It smells of wood polish, of something floral, a dried herb in a pot somewhere, or perhaps a perfumed candle, the kind of thing you have no reference for. Of cooked meat from somewhere deeper in the building, and it is warm. Not stove warm in the specific localized way of your house, where warmth is a circle around the stove and cold is everywhere else. This is a different warmth, a distributed even warmth, coming from tiled stoves in multiple rooms that heat the entire building to a consistent temperature. The kind of warmth that simply is, that doesn't require proximity to a heat source. Warmth as an ambient condition. You stop just inside the side door and feel it on the skin of your face. A woman appears from a doorway. She's maybe 30, in a grey dress with a white apron, her hair covered. A house serf, assigned to the domestic work of the manor rather than to the fields. She looks at you with professional assessment and slight impatience. Wood, she says, stack by the back stairs. Prokofy sent half a load this morning, but it's not enough. You'll carry what's in the courtyard until the stoves are satisfied. This is the task. Wood. Because this manor has tiled stoves in multiple rooms, all of them requiring fuel, and the person who keeps them fueled is currently sick, and you are the replacement. You carry wood. You carry wood through the side entrance, along a corridor that runs behind the family rooms, up a back staircase, stone, actual stone stairs, which is a thing you have only previously seen in the church, and to a set of doors that the woman opens for you one at a time. The stoves themselves are beautiful. This is an objective observation. They are tall, tiled structures in white and blue ceramic, floor to ceiling, with decorated panels showing pastoral scenes, birds, flowers, geometric patterns. They are nothing like the clay and brick stove that defines your house. They are the same technology refined past recognition, the same function transformed by money into something that belongs to a different category of object entirely. You load the stoves, you go back to the courtyard, you carry more wood, and while you do this, while you move through the corridors, while you make your quiet and purposeful way between the courtyard and the back stairs, you see things. You see a room with furniture. This sounds ordinary, but it isn't. Furniture in this sense means chairs, actual chairs with cushions, arranged around a table with a cloth on it. More chairs along the walls, a cabinet with glass doors, behind which are objects made of porcelain, white and blue, small figurines, a clock. You see portraits on the walls, oil paintings in heavy frames, faces looking out with the particular confidence of people who've been considered important enough to have their faces painted. Obolensky's ancestors, presumably. They look out over the corridor with the same expression you've occasionally seen on Filipov's face when he's deciding whether or not to use the strap. Not cruelty exactly, just the total absence of uncertainty about their own position in things. You see through an open doorway the library. You don't know it's called a library. You don't have a word for a room whose purpose is to contain books. But you see the shelves, floor to ceiling, covering 3 walls, and on the shelves, books. Many books. More books than you have previously seen in your life by an order of magnitude that you can't begin to calculate. You stop in the corridor. The maid appears at your elbow. Keep moving. You keep moving. But you carry the image with you, all those shelves, all the accumulated knowledge compressed into objects made of paper and leather, stored in a warm, dry room that smells of polish and old binding. Every person in Goryachevo who knows things, your grandmother, the priest, old Prokhor who has seen 4 runaways, knows what they know because someone told them, or because they did it and remembered. The knowledge lives in people. It dies when the people die. Those books are knowledge that doesn't die when the person dies. This distinction, this specific difference between what your world contains and what the Count's world contains, settles somewhere in you quietly and does not leave. You carry wood for 6 hours. At midday the maid brings you bread and a bowl of something from the kitchen. The bread is white. The bowl contains kasha, buckwheat groats cooked with fat and salt, dense and filling. You eat it standing in the courtyard because nobody has offered you a place to sit and you are not going to ask. The kasha is the best thing you've eaten in weeks. This is not a small observation. You eat it carefully, in the way you've learned to eat good things when you have them, slowly letting each spoonful register, extending the experience as long as the bowl allows. The cook, a stout woman who comes to the kitchen door to check if you need more, looks at you eating with an expression that might be compassion, or might be curiosity, or might be the way you look at a stray dog that's found something to eat. Good? She asks. Yes, you say. Thank you. She goes back inside. You stand in the cold courtyard with the empty bowl and think about the 18 windows and the books and the tiled stoves and the kasha. You think about your mother carrying water from the well in the dark. You think about the bowl going around the table, the spoon passed hand to hand. A door opens somewhere in the upper floors. Voices, indistinct. A burst of laughter. A woman's laugh, high and surprised and real. Someone in this house is laughing. Somewhere in this house is warmth and laughter and white bread and books. And somewhere in this house, in a closet or a room or a corner of the accounts ledger, is the calculation that determines how little Goryachevo's people can be given and still kept working. You hand the bowl back to the cook when she reappears. Thank you, you say again. You go back to carrying wood. The village priest is named Father Seraphim, and he is the most complicated figure in Goryachevo. He's a short man, round in the middle, with a beard that he keeps cleaner than most men in the village manage. He is technically an educated person. He attended a seminary, he can read and write. He knows enough Latin for the liturgy and enough Russian for the sermon. He is the only person in Goryachevo who owns more than 2 books. He also receives his salary in part from Count Obolensky, who built the church and nominally controls the parish living. This is the situation he navigates every Sunday morning when he stands at the altar and delivers the sermon that is supposed to be the word of God, but is also always in conversation with the question of who is paying for his house and his food and the candles on the altar. You have sat in this church every Sunday since you were old enough to stand through a service. The church is cold in winter. No tiled stoves here, just the body heat of the congregation, and smells of incense and old wood and damp stone. The icons on the walls are old and darkened, the gold leaf worn away in places, the painted faces of saints looking out from under centuries of candle smoke. Father Seraphim's sermons are, in your observation, doing 2 things simultaneously. They are saying, patience, endurance, God sees, the meek shall inherit, suffer now for heaven's reward. They are also saying, underneath, in the spaces between, something else that Father Seraphim is doing with his eyes, when they rest on a face he knows has been treated badly. So, look, that is not quite acknowledgement, but is also not denial. You have never discussed this with anyone. You're not sure you have the words for it, but you notice it. After services, in the churchyard before the congregation disperses, Father Seraphim sometimes stops to speak to individual families. He stops to speak to your mother sometimes when Vanya was at his worst. A brief conversation, a hand on her arm. Not empty comfort, something more specific, more like, I know, I see. He can't do much. He is caught in the same web you're all caught in, and his is a comfortable corner of it, and he knows this, and it costs him something to know it. On the Sunday after the petition was denied about Stepan, Father Seraphim's sermon was about Lazarus, not the raising, the earlier part, the rich man at his feast and Lazarus at the gate. The detail that the rich man knew Lazarus's name, knew it. He looked at nobody specific while he said this. He looked at nobody specific in a way that was extremely specific. After the service, he didn't stop to speak to anyone. He went straight back inside the church. You walked home with your mother through the cold churchyard and didn't say anything about the sermon, and neither did she, and the silence had a quality to it that was different from regular silence. In March, when the roads are bad but passable, there is a market in the district town. The district town is Spassk, 14 kilometers from Goryachevo. You've been there once in your life, 2 years ago, when your mother needed to sell some linen and buy salt and a specific type of hook for the fishing line. This March, your mother sends you, alone. This is a marker of something. It is the first time she's trusted you to make the trip and the transactions without supervision. She gives you specific instructions, what to sell, a length of woven linen, which she's been working on through the winter evenings, at what minimum price, what to buy, salt, and if enough money remains, a small packet of tea, what to do if you're asked for your papers, show the travel permit she's obtained from Filippov for the purpose. The travel permit is a piece of paper with Filippov's signature and the estate seal that permits Nikolai Avdeyevich, serf of the Obolensky estate, to travel to Spassk market and return within 1 day. You fold this paper and put it inside your shirt against your skin, where you can feel it with every step. The walk to Spassk takes 3 hours in the March mud. You leave before dawn and arrive when the market is in full morning bustle. Spassk is, by any objective standard, not a large town. Perhaps 2,000 people, a main street with wooden buildings, a church, a tavern, a row of market stalls set up in the central square. But to you, after Goryachevo, it is enormous. There are people you don't know. This sounds simple, and it is not. In Goryachevo, you know everyone, every face, every family history, every particular. Here, the crowd contains strangers, people from other villages, other estates. A merchant in a coat that has buttons, actual buttons down the front. 2 soldiers in uniform standing at ease near the tavern door. A group of women from somewhere speaking Russian with an accent different from yours. The market stalls, cloth, salt, dried fish, iron tools, pots, cheap printed fabrics. A man selling ribbons from a tray hung around his neck, calling out their colours and prices. A woman with a live hen under her arm negotiating. The noise of 100 conversations happening simultaneously. Not the 1,000 conversations of a city, you have no reference for that. But 100 is already more than you're used to, already something that requires adjustment, that makes your body orient differently. You sell the linen. Your mother told you not to go below a certain price, and the first buyer offers below it, and you say no, politely, firmly, the way she said to. And the buyer acts offended and walks away, and you feel your heart hammering in your chest with the specific terror of someone who has said no and might be wrong. But 15 minutes later, another buyer appears. She examines the linen with her fingers, pulling it through her grip to test the weave, and she offers a fair price, and you accept. You buy the salt. You have enough left for the tea. You buy a small paper packet of tea, the cheapest kind, already twice brewed somewhere else and dried and sold for a fraction of the price of real tea but still tea, and you fold it carefully and put it in your coat. And then you have 20 minutes before you need to start back. You walk through the market, you look at things, you look at the printed cloth on the stalls, the colours that exist in this market that don't exist in your village. You look at the iron tools, axes, scythes, hoes, and calculate how much better the one you need is than the one you have, and the price, and the impossibility. You look at a man who is demonstrating a device for something, you can't tell what, to a small crowd, making it do a thing and then ask him for a kopeck. You look at the soldiers, their uniforms, their posture, the specific posture of men who have been trained to stand in a particular way. You think about your father, you think about Stepan Kondratiev, you think about the travel permit against your chest. This piece of paper, this Filippov signature, is the only thing that makes your presence here legal. Without it, you are a runaway. Without it, you are Stepan, 40 kilometers from home. With it, you are permitted to be in this market for one day, for specific purposes, and then you must return. You start back. The walk home takes 4 hours in the afternoon mud, slower than the morning. The packet of tea is in your coat. The salt is in the bag. The money from the linen is in your belt. Your mother is waiting at the door. You give her the money, you give her the salt, you give her the tea, and for a moment she holds the small paper packet in her hands, and something crosses her face. Not quite happiness, but adjacent to it. The small specific satisfaction of something planned working out. Good, she says. She makes the tea that evening. Your grandmother, on a particular January evening when the cold has pinned everyone inside and the fire is burning low and the children are asleep, begins to talk about something she has not talked about before. Not a story about the forest, not the story of the blacksmith who left. Something older. She begins to talk about Pugachev. You know the name. You've heard it said the way people say the names of very old, very important things that changed everything, with a specific combination of weight and caution, as if the name still has power. Pugachev was a Cossack rebel who, 80 years ago, in the time of Catherine the Great, led the greatest serf uprising in Russian history. He swept across the Volga region with an army of serfs and Cossacks and proclaimed himself the true Tsar. He promised freedom. He promised land. Hundreds of noble families were killed. Estates burned. The uprising spread, and then it was crushed. Pugachev was captured and brought to Moscow in an iron cage and publicly executed. The rebellion ended. The serfs went back to their estates. Everything went back to what it had been, except that it was slightly worse, because the punishment for rebellion was swift, and the nobility was frightened, and frightened people who have power are dangerous. Your grandmother was born 6 years after Pugachev's execution, but she was told by people who remembered, and she tells you now what she was told. Not the battles, not the strategy or the politics. She tells you what the villages were like during those years, how the word travelled, the way all such words travel, person to person, night to night. How some people believed immediately, and some people were afraid to believe, and some people said nothing and watched. How the ones who believed went with Pugachev's army. How the ones who stayed watched their neighbours leave. And then the army came the other way. The real army. The imperial army. And she tells you what happened to the villages whose men had gone. She doesn't spare it. She tells it plainly, the way she tells things, with the pauses that are not hesitation. The way an old woman tells a thing she has carried for a long time tells it, with a kind of clarity that has been polished by decades of memory. When she finishes, the fire has burned very low. The room is dim. Why are you telling me this, you ask? She looks at you for a moment. Because, she says, you're the age to understand two things at once. You wait. The first thing, men have tried and been crushed, and this is real, and you should not forget it. A pause. The second thing, they tried, and this is also real, and you should not forget that either. She shifts on the bench. Her joints complain. You can hear it. The petition didn't work, she says. Timofey's petition. No, you say, and Pugachev's rebellion didn't work. No, and my grandmother prayed every night for 40 years for something to change, and it didn't change while she was alive. She looks at the dim fire. But here we are, she says. Still here, still talking. That's not nothing. You sit with this. After a while she goes back to the stove. You hear her settle onto the warm platform, the specific sounds of an old body arranging itself carefully. The fire has almost nothing left. You add a small piece of wood, enough to last the night. In the last week of February something happens. You are at the storehouse again, a different day, a different task, repairing a section of the roof where snow load has damaged two of the boards. You're up on the roof with Seryoga, the cold wind at this height more direct than at ground level, working with a hammer and nails that you're keeping warm in your coat pocket because cold nails drive poorly. Filipov is below. He's giving instructions to Prokofy about something related to the spring planting schedule. His horse is tied nearby. You can hear his voice but not the words. Then you hear a different sound. It comes from the direction of the village, a distance away, and it takes a moment to identify. A child crying, not the specific thin crying of hunger or cold. A sharper sound, the sound of something having gone wrong. Filipov stops talking. You look down from the roof. His head is turned toward the sound. His face from this angle, you've never seen his face from above before, has an expression you don't recognize on him. It lasts only a moment. Then his head turns back and he continues talking to Prokofy. But in that moment, his face was something you didn't expect. The sound from the village continues for another minute and then stops. Probably a child who fell. Probably nothing serious. But you sit on the cold roof with the hammer in your hand and think about the expression on Filipov's face when he heard it. You've been building a picture of Filipov your whole life from the ground level, from below, from the position of someone who watches him with wariness. You have categorized him as a specific kind of danger, the controlled kind, the kind that knows how much power it has and uses it precisely. But from above, for one moment, his face was not that. You don't know what to do with this. You don't have a framework for a Filipov who hears a child cry and turns his head. You drive the next nail in. The hammer hits true. Maybe people contain contradictions. Maybe the man who uses the strap can also hear a child and feel something. Maybe both of those things are real at the same time, and the system that made him what he is made him that way, carved out the parts that would have resisted, hardened the parts that serve. Maybe. You're not sure this excuses anything. You're not sure it doesn't. You finish the roof repair. You come down from the roof. You don't look at Filippov on your way past, but you carry the image. Every person in Goryachevo lives with a specific fear that is not abstract: fire. In a village of log houses packed close together, with straw-filled roofs and tallow lamps and clay stoves that occasionally crack and shoot sparks, fire is not a metaphor. It is the thing that can end everything in an hour. Villages in Russia burn. They have always burned. The word for a house fire in this culture is not a borrowed word or an unusual word. It is one of the oldest words in the language. In 1847, 6 years ago, the village of Morozovka, 12 kilometers east, burned in a single night. 37 houses. 6 dead. The rest of the village had to scatter to relatives and neighbours through the winter. You know this story because everyone in this region knows it. You know the names of the families. You know what happened in the years after. And so every winter evening, when the tallow lamp is burning and the stove is doing its work and the wind is pushing against the walls, there is a layer of attention running underneath everything else. Not panic, a watchfulness. The way sailors watch weather continuously as background process. Your mother checks the stove before sleeping. She checks where the embers are, whether any have shifted, whether the clay seal around the flue has cracked again. She checks the lamp, when to trim it, when to let it go out. She checks the placement of everything that burns. You know to check the stove too. You know what a crack in the clay seal sounds like, a faint specific clicking as the heat expands the gap. You know what it means when smoke comes into the room rather than up the chimney. One night in late January you wake to the smell, not your house, but close. The smell of burning wood that is not your stove, a different quality to it, coming from outside, from the wrong direction. You're off the sleeping platform in one movement. Across the room, the door open. The Yevstigne house. 3 houses down at the corner of the lane. A line of orange visible at the base of the wall, at the gap where the foundation meets the ground. You shout. You shout loud and immediately, not calculating whether you might be wrong. Because being wrong is recoverable and being right and silent is not. The village wakes in 3 minutes. 3 minutes is fast. People sleep with this fear. The fire is at the base of the wall, not yet inside, not yet to the roof. Yevstiny's stove has cracked at the base, and hot ash has fallen through to the dried straw stored against the outside of the house wall. Men come with snow, buckets from the well, a long chain of people passing water in the cold. It takes 20 minutes to be sure the fire is out. Yevstigny stands outside in the cold in his sleeping clothes, coughing, his cough that you've been listening to since autumn, and shaking. His wife has the children in a blanket. All of them are alive. The house is damaged at one wall but standing. The village doesn't go back to sleep immediately. People stand around in the cold, talking in the low voices of people who have just avoided something. The relief has a particular quality, not joyful, more like the absence of a sound that has stopped, the specific quiet of a danger that passed. Your mother puts her hand on your shoulder briefly, the pressure of it specific and deliberate. Then she goes back inside. You stand a moment longer in the cold, looking at the scorched wall of Yevstiny's house in the light of the lanterns people have brought. The black mark on the grey logs. A line that was very nearly a different ending. You go back inside. You check your stove. April brings the mud and the conscription officer. He comes from the district town on a horse with 2 soldiers, and he goes first to Philippov and then to the village. The annual levy, the requirement for serf estates to provide a certain number of men for military service, is being filled. This year, 1 man from Goryachevo. The selection is Filippov's, technically, though done in consultation with the emir and with some nominal criteria. Married men are preferred to remain, men without family over those with, and so on. In practice, the selection has a politics to it that you're not old enough to fully follow but can see the outline of. The man selected is Timofey. Timofey, who said the petition had to be sent, who said, "What are we if we don't try? You don't know if this is coincidence. You genuinely don't know, and you turn it over in your mind in the days after and cannot resolve it. Coincidence is real. The criteria might have pointed to Timofey regardless. He is 28, relatively young, in good health, and has only recently married. His wife is pregnant with their first child. These are exactly the criteria that should have protected him. His wife's name is Tatiana. She is 17. She stands in the village lane when they come for Timofey on the appointed morning and watches with an expression that you do not look at directly, because some expressions are private even when they happen in public. Timofey says goodbye to his neighbours. He says goodbye to his mother, who does not cry in front of the soldiers, but whose face, you see it, you can't help seeing it, is the face of someone sustaining an impact. He looks at you, briefly as he passes. He is 28 years old. You're 12. You don't know each other well. There is a generation between you in village terms. But he looks at you with something specific, not advice, not instruction, just recognition. The look of one person to another that says, "I see you. I was here. Remember." Then the conscription officer's party moves on, and Timofey with it, and the village lane is just a lane again. You stand in the spring mud and watch the direction they went. May. The allotment strip is planted, the seeds are in the ground, rye, turnips, the few rows of your grandmother's beans along the edge, and now waiting. This is the other skill of farming that nobody tells you about. Not the ploughing, not the planting, not the harvest, but the waiting. The days between planting and first growth, when the soil holds its secret and you don't know what's happening underneath. When everything depends on variables beyond your control, rain, temperature, whether the frost comes back, whether the birds get to the seeds first. You've done what you can do. The rest is not yours. This is a thing you're learning at 12 that you will spend your whole life learning and never quite finish. The distinction between what you can affect and what you can't. The art of not exhausting yourself against the immovable while still fighting everything that can be moved. The balance between agency and acceptance that is required to survive in a place where you have very little of the former. The first green shoots appear on a warm morning in late May. You don't see them happen, nobody watches a seed germinate, but you're out in the field in the early morning for some other reason, and you notice them, the curved hooks of green pushing up through the dark soil, and you stop. The beans. Your grandmother's beans, the ones she's been growing from saved seed for 50 years, brought to this village in her apron when she walked here as a bride. Small, green, impossible seeming. There. You stand in the field in the early morning light, and you look at the bean shoots, and you feel something that you don't have a precise name for. Not quite happiness, not quite relief, something adjacent to both, a deep, bodily recognition that things are continuing, that the sequence is proceeding as it has proceeded before and might proceed again, that the logic of growth and return, which has been operating in this soil for longer than anyone alive can remember, is still working. Still working. This too is not nothing. Midsummer evening. The sky doesn't go properly dark until almost midnight at this latitude. The long northern twilight lingers for hours, a deep blue that doesn't become black, that holds a kind of light long past when it has any right to. You're sitting outside the house on the wooden step. Inside, everyone is asleep. The heat of the summer day, which was real heat today, has driven your mother and the children to sleep early and sprawled. Your grandmother is on the stove because she always is. The animals are quiet in their corner. You're sitting outside in the blue twilight, and the village is quiet, and the sky above the birch trees is doing its particular midsummer trick of holding light. Seryoga appears from his house and comes to sit beside you. Neither of you speak for a while. This is comfortable. You've been not speaking comfortably for years. Then Seryoga says, "Where do you think Stepan is? Stepan Kondratiev. Who ran, who was caught, who was flogged and then conscripted." "The army," you say. "I know that. But where? Which army? They fight everywhere now." This is true. The Russian Empire in 1853 is fighting in the Caucasus, managing borders with the Ottoman Empire, involved in the situation in the Crimea that will very shortly become what history will call the Crimean War. Though you don't know that yet. The army is everywhere. "I don't know," you say. "Do you think he regrets it?" Seryoga asks. "Running." You think about this. "I think," you say carefully, "that when he was running he didn't regret it, and when they caught him he probably did. And now," you pause, "now I don't know what he thinks. Maybe it changes." Seryoga is quiet. "I think about it sometimes," he says. "Running." You look at him. He's looking at the sky. "Me too," you say. A long pause. "But," you say. "But," he agrees. "But your mother. But your grandmother. But Vanya who was sick, and Masha who knows things, and Aliona who talks to the goat, and Petya who just learned to say your name. But everything that anchors you here is exactly the thing that would make leaving unbearable." "The emancipation rumour again," Seryoga says. "Did you hear?" "I heard." "You believe it?" You think about your grandmother's spindle, about the belief that has lived in this village through generations of disappointment. "I believe it might happen," you say, "before we're old." Seryoga considers this. 8 years, he says. You've both heard the peddler's estimate. "Maybe." You sit in the blue twilight. The birch trees at the edge of the village are very still. A bird, you don't know what kind, calls once somewhere in the darkness under the trees and doesn't call again. 8 years. 8 years is a long time. 8 years is also you at 20, which is a person you can almost imagine, a shape you can almost see at the edge of things. "I'm going to have my own shop," Seryoga says. He's been saying this since he was 9. The specifics change. Sometimes it's a blacksmith shop, sometimes a carpenter's, but the ambition remains. Some form of his own thing, his own work, something with his name on it. "You'll need to learn a trade," you say. "I know. I'm thinking the mill." The village mill is operated by an old man named Kondrat, no relation to Stepan, who's been running it for 30 years and is finally starting to need help. If Seryoga apprenticed there, learned the work, "You could," you say. "That could work." He nods, sits with the possibility. You think about the books in the Count's library, about all that knowledge in a warm, dry room that you were not supposed to look at and looked at anyway, about what it would mean to be able to read, about who gets to read and who carries wood. The blue sky deepens imperceptibly. The light pulls back by degrees so slow you can't see the movement, only the result. "We should sleep," Seryoga says. "Yes," you say. Neither of you move immediately. 8 years isn't that long, Seryoga says finally. "No," you agree, "it's not." You go inside, and then it does. The year turns again the way it always turns, with the patient indifference of something that has been turning for a very long time, and will continue turning regardless of what happens at any particular point on its circumference. Summer becomes autumn, becomes winter. You are 13 now. The root cellar is stocked. The grain has been counted. The stove has been repaired at the east side where the clay cracked over summer. The best shoes have been replaced. Your mother wove new ones in September. Sitting by the lamp in the evenings, her hands move in with the automatic precision of a skill so embedded it requires no attention. Vanya is well, has been well all year. This fact has a specific quality to it now. It's not the relief of something survived, but the quiet confidence of something stable. He is 11 and ridiculous and your mother's favourite, which she would never say, and which is obvious. Masha is 8, and has begun, this autumn, to learn the loom. Your grandmother is teaching her. You've watched them together, the old woman's swollen hands guiding the young smooth ones, the specific patience of a teacher who knows this knowledge needs to survive her. Petya is 2.5, and has opinions, loud ones. He has decided that Borya the goat is his personal property, and guards this position aggressively. Alyona is 5 and has become Masha's shadow, following her around the house with the dedicated attention of someone who has identified exactly where the real knowledge in the room is concentrated, the family intact. Your mother, 32, with grey hair and cracked hands and the specific competence of someone who has managed a difficult situation for years and knows exactly what she's doing. Your grandmother, on the stove, breathing slowly, still here, still the repository of everything that doesn't fit in anyone else's head. You, 13, carrying water and wood and sacks of grain, and the specific knowledge that you're slowly accumulating. How to navigate the Lord's demands and the village's politics and the arithmetic of survival and the distance between what is and what might be. Not yet enough knowledge, not yet enough age or size or freedom, but more than last year, and more next year than this. The lamp burns low again, November again. This is the rhythm. The lamp burns low, the family sleeps, the night comes, the night goes, the dawn comes, the barrel needs breaking, the stove needs feeding. This has been the rhythm for generations before you and will be for generations after, or it will not, because 8 years from this night something will change, and the rhythm will be altered in ways that nobody in this house can yet imagine. But that is 8 years from now. Tonight is tonight. You're on the floor. Vanya has the stove again. A small cold, nothing serious. Your mother's hand on his forehead, and the quiet reassurance of not serious. And you're lying on your back looking at the ceiling. The ceiling of the izba is blackened with decades of smoke. In the lamplight it has a texture, a depth, like something you might try to read if you knew how to read smoke. The history of every fire that's burned in this stove is up there. Every meal cooked, every winter survived, every cold morning when your father or his father before him put wood into the fire. You're thinking about the books in the Count's library. You think about them more than you expected. The images stayed. All those shelves, all that knowledge in a room, not in anybody's head where it dies when they die, but in objects that persist. You can't read. This is a fact. You're not illiterate through any failure. You've never been taught, because there is no school in Goryachevo, and the priest teaches for pay and pay is not something your family has. You're illiterate because you're a serf, and serfs are not taught to read as a matter of policy, because literate serfs are considered more dangerous than illiterate ones. And this policy has the internal logic of all oppressive policies. It's self-serving, it's effective, and it perpetuates the conditions that make it seem necessary. But the books exist. And 8 years from now, maybe when the emancipation comes, when the legal category of serf dissolves, when you're 20 years old and have choices your mother never had, the knowledge in those books will still be there. Not yours. Not yet. But not categorically impossible. This is the thought you fall asleep with. Not a plan. Not yet. But a direction. The faint outline of a direction. The way you can see the birch tree alley to the manor from the hay barn, even in winter. Even from 8 kilometres away. Just a shape against the flat white. Just enough to know there is something there. Something there. Your grandmother breathes above you. Petya murmurs in his sleep something that might be a word. The fire settles. Let me put you to sleep now. The house is quiet. The cold is outside where it belongs. The stove is doing what it does. You are Kolya. You are 12 years old, and you will be 13 and then 20 and then older, and the world will change while you're in it, and the change will be imperfect and complicated, and will come with its own disappointments, and it will still be real. The world will change while you're in it. Right now, your feet are warm. Your stomach is not full, but it's not empty either. The broth from the cabbage water is still warmth somewhere in the middle of you. Thin warmth. Barely enough warmth. The warmth of a meal that was calculated down to the last spoonful and given out with care. Your mother is asleep at last. You can tell by her breathing it's shifted into something slower and deeper. She doesn't sleep deeply until she's sure everyone else is settled. She waits. Every night she waits until the house is safe around her, and then she sleeps. She's asleep now. You're allowed to sleep now. Let the sounds of the house carry you down. The crackle of the stove, less frequent now. The fire burning low. The embers doing their patient work. The shift of wood. The tick of cooling clay. The sound of a building breathing in the cold. The breathing of 7 people, each one specific. Your mother, low and slow. Your grandmother, with her long intervals. Vanya, even now with a slight roughness of his chest. Masha, quick and light. Alyona, who sleeps with small sounds as if she's narrating something. Petya, absolute and trusting. And yours, your own breathing. You can hear it. Slow it down. Slower. The birch trees at the edge of the village are moving in the wind. You can hear them through the walls, a distant creak, a click of branches. They've been here longer than the village. They'll be here after it's gone. Birch trees in a Russian winter are a specific fact of the world. White trunks, bare branches, patient endurance. You have some of that in you. You've been here through a winter now, a full winter, and the spring came after it, and the summer and the autumn, and another winter has started, and you are still here, which was not guaranteed, which is not nothing. The stars are there. Somewhere above the smoke and the clouds and the dark sky, the same stars your grandmother looks at, the same stars that have always been here. Patient. Your body is tired. the real tiredness. The tiredness of someone who has spent the day moving through cold and doing necessary things and asking nothing extravagant from the world. Just another day managed, another winter survived to the point of almost spring. This is enough. Right now, in this moment, this is enough. Let the sounds become less specific. The crackle of the stove becoming something more like a pulse. Your grandmother's breathing, the wind. Let your thoughts slow down the way thoughts do when the body has finally said, enough. Rest. Put it down. You can put it down. Everything that needs to be done tomorrow will be done tomorrow. The water barrel will be broken in the morning and you'll carry the bucket and your feet will be cold and the work will be there. All of it will be there. But that is tomorrow. Tonight you don't have to carry it. Let it rest. Let it all rest. The dream, when it comes, is the hay barn, the top of the ladder, the flat white world spread out below you, and the manor house in the distance, and the birch trees, and the frozen stream, and beyond the forest edge the land continuing, flat and vast and impossibly large. And in the dream you're not afraid of the size of it. In the dream you look at it, and it's just the world. Enormous, indifferent, and also yours somehow. All of it yours in the only way that matters. Yours to exist in, to have seen, to have stood on the top of a hay barn and looked at in the early winter light. Yours. Centuries will pass, the village will change, the system will end, the log houses will decay and be rebuilt and decay again. The stove your father built, the masterpiece he'll never come back to, will eventually go cold. The birch trees will fall and new ones will grow in their places, but the flat land will remain. The same ancient flat land beneath the same ancient sky. People will still be born into it and wake before dawn and carry water and do the necessary things and lie down at night in the quiet of a house where everyone they love is still breathing. Some things don't change. The specific weight of a child asleep in the same room with you, the safety of knowing where they are, that doesn't change. The way a fire banked for the night continues to give heat long after the burning stops, that doesn't change. The way a mother gives herself the smallest piece so someone else can have slightly more, that is one of the oldest human things. It doesn't change. You're in your warm bed, wherever you are, in whatever year this finds you. That warmth is earned. Not by you specifically, not all of it, but by someone in your line who was cold and stayed warm, who was hungry and found food, who was afraid and kept going, who survived a winter that had no guarantee of spring. That survival passed itself forward in the only way it can, by continuing, by the stubborn, unglamorous, patient act of not stopping. Let it carry you. Let the stove hold its heat. Let the stars be patient. Let the lark wait for March. Let this room, whatever room you're in, be enough tonight, because it is enough. You are warm enough and safe enough, and the next breath is coming, and the one after that, and tomorrow there will be work to do, and you will do it, but that is tomorrow. Tonight, just this, just breathing, just here. Good night.